Valentina had a tough life. Her father heroically perished in a hot zone when she was still a young girl. Her mother raised her alone, struggling to provide for her daughter. Unfortunately, she wasn't successful at it. Valentina's mother, Veronica, suffered from poor health and would spend months on end confined to the hospital. Eventually, her employer began hinting that they didn't need chronically ill workers. After resigning once again of her own accord, Valentina's mother would lock herself in a room where she would cry into her pillow out of helplessness. Money was always scarce for Valentina and her mother. Sometimes their dinner would consist of nothing more than bread dipped in salted sunflower oil or plain noodles. At school, Valentina was the worst dressed among the children, and they would mock her. She had grown accustomed to the ridicule and the whispers from her classmates, who would comment on her threadbare sweater each day. When Valentina turned 14, her mother's niece, her late mother's own sister, took her in to live with her. Aunt Clava believed that Valentina, who was now quite mature, could be useful in managing household chores. She burdened her niece with all the domestic responsibilities and even sent her to the nearest store to buy wine. That was where Valentina would encounter Clava's best friend, who worked there and could supply them with alcohol on credit. Aunt Clava enjoyed indulging in a drink in the evenings. When they didn't have money for wine, she wouldn't hesitate to send Valentina to the neighbor's house to borrow moonshine. At the end of the month, they would dip pieces of bread in the margarine, and without delay, Aunt Clava would distribute the borrowed money, leaving both her and her niece destitute. Intoxicated, Aunt Clava would constantly get into disputes. Valentina had been subjected to the same song about getting married and the burden it brings, which often brought her to tears. It was the same friend who sold wine to Aunt Valentina, whose son, Evelina, worked in her own store. Claudia, the ruthless overseer of their family's prosperity, frequently engaged Valentina in conversations about Evelina, wondering if Valentina liked him. However, the girl remained silent in response. When Valentina came of age, Claudia began tempting her with a life of abundance, describing the comfortable existence she would have if she married the store owner. Claudia saw Valentina not as a niece, but as a means to secure her own well-being. If Valentina became the wife of the store owner, Claudia believed she wouldn't be mistreated and could freely visit the store without carrying money. She envisioned a scenario where she would receive groceries as gifts and debts wouldn't have to be repaid. Claudia owed a significant sum of money to her friend, but her grown-up niece wasn't in a hurry to involve herself in the financial problems concocted by her aunt. Valentina, who had always been obedient and compliant, suddenly erupted, shouting that she wouldn't solve her aunt's financial problems. Then she left, slamming the door behind her. When Valentina returned after some time, she gathered a few simple belongings and took along her savings, which her aunt knew nothing about. Valentina had been collecting money bit by bit ever since she discovered that there was some accumulated cash in their house. She intended to use the money to pay for a modest room. She also didn't forget to take her father's medals and the accompanying documents, as they were the only mementos she had of her deceased father. The medal had become a talisman for Valentina. The money was sufficient not only to pay for the modest rented room, but also for food during the initial period. After moving away from her aunt, Valentina contemplated her next steps. She wanted to pursue further education, but that seemed impossible because she needed to pay for her room and support herself while studying. One day, Valentina received a free newspaper at the supermarket, which contained listings for job vacancies in the city. There were many options, but they all required specialized skills or qualifications that Valentina didn't possess. Valentina randomly dialed a phone number listed in the newspaper for a cleaning position at a company. It seemed like the only option available to her at the time, even though it involved menial work. She hoped to earn enough money from it to sustain herself. Valentina was immediately hired in the Human Resources Department due to the particularly toxic atmosphere among the cleaning staff at the company. The office had been dirty for 3 days already. After signing her employment contract, Valentina promptly began her duties. Entering one of the rooms filled with computers and office workers, Valentina diligently started mopping the floor. Suddenly, she was startled by a sharp scream that pierced her ears. It came from a beautiful but extremely angry girl, radiating a poisonous allure reminiscent of villainous characters. She had menacing black eyebrows, almond-shaped malicious eyes, hair as dark as raven's wings, and distinctive sharp features, even sporting a witch-like forelock in the center of her forehead. A single glance at her was enough to understand that this beauty was more than a mean-spirited individual. Nonetheless, the girl had a certain appeal of her own. "What's that stench? I don't understand." Valentina trembled in response to the girl's shrill voice. The venomous beauty promptly ordered her to wash the live mop with cleaning solution. Passing by two guys sitting near the exit, Valentina overheard their whispers as they appraised her figure and other qualities. Valentina herself was a pretty girl, but unlike her venomous counterpart who sent her to mop the hospital with a rubber mop, her beauty was gentle and soft. Valentina had kind facial features, large gray eyes, a high forehead, childishly plump lips, light, thick hair tied in a loose ponytail with a simple terry cloth band, and even in old-fashioned, out-of-style attire, her slender waist and tall figure couldn't be hidden. Timidly lowering her eyes, holding the mop in her hand, she reminded the guys of a poor Cinderella scolding one of the evil stepdaughters. They shared their observations in hushed whispers, hoping not to be heard by the office queen, Mariana, who berated Valentina and shared her impressions about the new cleaning lady. The girl was undoubtedly something, they thought, but her clothes and shoes were poor. Little did they know that Mariana heard every whisper they exchanged. The office queen had excellent hearing, like all wicked women who enjoyed tormenting others. Valentina hadn't even left the room yet, and Mariana was already enthusiastically discussing every aspect of her poor old wardrobe with her female colleagues. Valentina felt an urge to break the mop over her knee and tell everyone to go to hell. But the memories of her own dire circumstances held her back. Without giving in to the surging emotions, Valentina rinsed the rubber mop and returned to the office, resuming her floor cleaning duties, ignoring the mockery of her female coworkers. Each day spent at work felt like poison. Mariana managed to turn not only the employees, but also the management against the new cleaning lady, except for one guy who secretly sympathized with Valentina, the same guy who initially called her Cinderella. One day, he discreetly waited for Valentina near the office, since her work hours ended later than others. After waiting, Igor invited her to a cafe where they chatted cheerfully. Igor seemed open and kind to Valia. However, the next day, one of Mariana's friends approached her in one of the long office corridors. "There you are, silly girl. Found someone to flirt with, huh?" "Igor, Mariana's guy. They're planning to get married. If I tell her that you went to a cafe with him, Marushka will ruin you. She'll soon be in charge of the department." "That'll be fun for you," the girl said maliciously. The following day, Valia received an unpleasant surprise when she entered the room where the department she worked in was located. Mariana immediately started singing a song, "Hello, Second-Hand Girl," while wearing a serious expression on her face. She asked Valia where she could buy a vintage sweater like the one Valia was wearing, referring to Valia's worn-out shoes as excessive NKVD fashion and Spanish boots. Mariana came up with new and elaborate ways to ridicule each item of Valia's wardrobe. The employees present during the humiliation politely chuckled at Mariana's mean jokes. Valia didn't want to argue with the sarcastic careerist. From then on, Igor never invited Valia to a cafe again. By chance, they bumped into each other in the corridor. Igor shyly avoided eye contact and looked away. He couldn't bear to look into the eyes of the girl he had liked so much. He felt ashamed and disgusted with himself for betraying his budding affection. Even though he had laughed along with everyone else during the spectacle orchestrated by Mariana, he had grown disenchanted with Marushka long ago. But he didn't dare hint that they should end their relationship. Igor enjoyed his job in the office, and the salary suited him. He didn't want to jeopardize his future position as the department's head, so he didn't want to start a conflict with Mariana, who would soon hold that position. People like Igor were commonly referred to as opportunists. He hoped for career advancement and securing a place under the sun by any means necessary, even if it meant trampling on genuine emotions and betraying his nascent love. After the harassment of the cleaner who dared to pursue her fiancée, Mariana, the queen of the office, was satisfied with publicly humiliating Valia, and the temporary boost to her bruised self-esteem was short-lived. Valia soon confronted the harsh reality of life. If she quit this job, she risked being left without a paycheck. She hadn't read the employment contract, but when she went to discuss her resignation with the HR department, they informed her that if she left before completing at least 1 month of work out of the agreed-upon 40, she risked not receiving a penny. Allegedly, it was written in the employment contract. It was heartbreaking to lose the hard-earned money, so Valia had to stay. Almost all the money from her savings had run out. Besides, Valia now had to take care of a little pet. She couldn't leave Martin hungry. The small white kitten had somehow snuck into the office, and Valia had to hide him from the malicious Marushka for the rest of the workday. Being a kind-hearted soul, Valia couldn't leave the helpless month-old kitten on the streets, so she took him home. The kind old lady who lived in one of Valentina's rooms didn't mind the presence of the kitten. Valia named him Martin. When money became scarce, Valia shared her last kefir with her pet. The long-awaited payday coincided with the day when the boss decided to visit the office. He was the head of the entire network of branches and enterprises, and everyone feared him except Mariana. She managed to gain the trust of the former military chief, who appreciated her sharp mind, predatory beauty, audacity, and boldness. When the management made rounds to inspect their properties, the boss didn't miss the opportunity to visit his favorite's department. Upon seeing him, Mariana stood up from her seat and hurriedly approached him, accidentally knocking over a half-empty coffee cup on the armrest of the massive computer chair. The remnants of coffee spilled from the fallen paper cup onto the floor silently, and Mariana quickly kicked the dirty cup under the table. She beamed with a friendly smile and approached the boss. "Hello, Nikolay Ivanovich. Why haven't you visited us for so long? We've missed you." Mariana skillfully pursed her well-defined lips into a tube, as if she wanted to kiss the boss. Then, she shot a vengeful glance at Valia, who was wiping the photocopier with a napkin. Ignoring the provocation, the boss continued, "Well, there's never a dull moment here. I don't know who they've hired to clean. The office is a mess. It's unbearable. I feel like I'm sitting in a pigsty." Mariana gently took the boss's arm and led him to her workstation, pointing her finger at the coffee stain left by her outburst of anger. "You see? No, you don't see how our cleaner neglects her duties. My workstation is completely ignored. It's dusty and dirty now." Nikolay Ivanovich furrowed his brows. He was not an old man yet, imposing and muscular, with a military bearing. Mariana knew very well that the meticulous boss didn't tolerate disorder, so she decided to undermine the newcomer whom she saw as her rival. "Come to my office," the boss said tersely as he walked away, leaving Valia behind. His tone did not bode well. "Why is there disorder in the office? Why are you performing your job duties so poorly?" The boss carefully examined the flushed face of the embarrassed girl. The office was well organized, so he couldn't understand where the stain and dirt had come from. "I don't know," she struggled to say. "Valia just doesn't like me in the office. Mariana is constantly picking on me. Maybe she deliberately spilled the coffee. She just wants you to fire me." The boss, Nikolay Ivanovich, tapped his desk with the cap of his pen, lost in thought. "You seem like a good girl. I don't know why the office workers have such animosity towards you. By the way, who are you? Introduce yourself." Valia stated her first and last name, and when he heard her rather rare and unusual last name, Boss became concerned. "And your father's name? What was his name?" Valia lowered her head, but then raised it proudly. "His name was Yuri. He perished. But boss, he was my friend on the North Caucasus. He saved my life, pulling me out of the line of fire." Boss fell into deep contemplation, and Valia stood there, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, as silence dragged on. Finally, he spoke. "So that's what you're saying, Mariashka. Hazing suited you just fine. We'll get to the bottom of this. Go back to work for now. Tomorrow, I'll instruct them to hire a new cleaner. It's not fitting for the daughter of a hero to be pushing mops around. You should go and study. Your mother is alive, isn't she?" Valentina shook her head in disagreement. "No, I've been an orphan for a long time. I'm living with my aunt now, renting a room." Boss tightened his grip on the hand lying on the table, causing his knuckles to turn white. "We'll sort it out." On that day, Valia ran to her rented apartment, unable to contain her joy. Her first paycheck, and even a generous bonus. She quickly stopped by the pet store, buying cat pate for Martin. She saw a toy for kittens and purchased it as well. She was so proud of herself that she could provide for both herself and the kitten. But the next day held an even greater surprise. When Valia arrived at the office, she was astonished to see an unfamiliar elderly woman mopping the floors. The woman approached her, overly sweet and obsequious, and Valia went to see the HR manager. The manager brought a new contract. Valia was hired as a customer service operator. In the second half of the day, the boss arrived. He invited Valia back to his office and handed her the keys to an apartment. These are the keys to my second apartment. I bought it for my future children, but I haven't had any yet. It's not right for my friend's daughter to be living in rented rooms. Live there. You can't be running around with a kitten, Valia said, asserting herself. Nikolay Ivanovich chuckled. Sure, bring the kitten with you. You can even bring an alligator. The apartment has been empty for a long time. You and the kitten will take charge together. Having taken her belongings and Martin, Valia bid farewell to the elderly woman from whom she rented a room and moved into a spacious 3-bedroom apartment. After the move, Valia didn't rush to work, she flew. Despite being a simple operator and rarely handling calls, her boss treated her like a beloved child. He bought her new clothes and equipped her apartment with household appliances. He also started briefing her on the company's affairs. The childless soldier saw Valentina as his successor. He wished for Valia to be able to replace him in all areas related to managing the network of offices and enterprises if anything were to happen to him. Only Aunt Clava constantly insisted that there was no money for education, but Valentin's late father's friend insisted on her enrolling in the university's economics faculty. Surprised by the transformations in the appearance and behavior of the former janitor, Igor immediately found the courage to tell Mariana that their relationship had run its course. This statement didn't hurt her at all. Mariana had long considered him a hopeless loser and had been trying to flirt with her boss's son at her new workplace. Having gained freedom from the former office queen, Igor tried to establish a connection with Valia, but the girl already knew his true value and rejected his offer to go somewhere on the weekend. Valia refused him briefly and coldly, surprised as she remembered, how could I have liked such a cunning opportunist before? It turned out he was worthless to Mariana and Valentina. How could she have suffered for him? Cried because of his betrayal when he enticed her and then switched to Mariana. Where were my eyes? What could possibly be attractive about someone like Igor, except for his sweet, sickeningly cute face? And I even suffered from unrequited love, cried, blamed myself for past short-sightedness, Valia thought. One day, while buying food for Martin at the pet store, Valia accidentally knocked a jar of pate off the shelf. Skillfully catching the jar with a strong hand, she prevented it from falling to the floor. Don't skimp on your little kitty, buy good food, said a tall, unfamiliar guy approvingly, placing the jar back on the shelf, nodding. I just love him, Valia replied, slightly bewildered by the guy's agility and quick reaction. And I love my kitty too. He's a Savannah. What breed is your cat? The guy asked. Mine is purebred, of the Russian nobility breed, the girl jokingly replied. He sneaked into our office, and I picked him up so that no one would throw him out the window. That's how the kitty ended up living with me. I named him Martin. Valia suddenly opened up out of nowhere. Less than 10 minutes after meeting, the guy and the girl chatted as if they were old friends. Archip understood Valia's jokes, and Valentina liked his openness and the way he shared his views on life. Unbeknownst to Valia, Archip accompanied her to her home. They stood near the entrance for a long time, talking about everything under the sun. They wanted to converse with each other as a young man and a young woman. They didn't want to say goodbye at all, but it was already too dark outside. Valia thought it would be inappropriate to openly express such sympathy for each other on their first meeting, but Archip anticipated her thoughts and said he didn't want to leave, but decency required it. It was as if he had read her mind. Climbing the stairs, Valentina thought with surprise that it turns out all those stories about impulses, soulmates, and one's person were true. She spent the whole night without sleep, replaying scenes from the novels she had read, where the characters met their soulmates. In the morning, feeling completely sleep-deprived, Valia got ready for work. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like going. She wanted to run to the pet store to try and find Archip. They had even forgotten to exchange phone numbers during their conversation. To her surprise, as she exited the entrance, she saw him. "You know, I couldn't leave you. I just ran home to feed my cat and then came back to your place. I watched your window all night." The guy pointed to the windows on the second floor, where they both lived, "and you didn't sleep either. I saw the light in your bedroom all night. It's destiny, you know. It was meant to be. You're mine, and I'm yours, period," Archip said, drawing the girl closer to him, greedily inhaling the scent of her hair. If you enjoyed the story, please support me with a thumbs up button. And to stay updated on new interesting stories, press the bell icon after subscribing. Have a good day.